1931 China floods. In 1931, there was more precipitation than normal, causing the river basin of the Yangtze River to overflood. There was initially more rain than expected in April. Then in July, rapid rains came, and by August, there was major flooding. There was no real measures taken during that time to control the flood, and it had devastating effects. The main affected area was a low-lying region downstream of the Three Gorges Dam, containing lakes, marshes, and meandering streams. The Yangtze River is the largest river in Asia. Flooding is common in China. There have been several floods in China, even as recent as 2016. The 1931 China floods caused 500 square miles of land to become flooded. China was heavily populated along the river, causing 500,000 people from their homes just when it started. It carried large amounts of sediment which accumulated over certain areas. The reason being was because of the Great Jianjing Levee that was built in 1548. There was accumulation of sediment, and that was also another reason that flooding levels increased. The levee blocked it from going to rivers that acted as ways of controlling the floods. Deforestation was also another reason that the area was not well suited to handle floods.
52 million people were affected by this flood, with 2 million people being killed, 150,000 of which drowned in the initial flooding. The deadliest blight was from widespread disease, becoming so bad that a majority of many populations became refugees, fleeing their homes. An example was 300,000 people dying from malaria transferred by an increase in the mosquito population due to the flooding. It interrupted normal life because homes were ruined, jobs were lost, and the year's harvest was lost, and stored food was destroyed, making it impossible to replant crops since its winter was around the corner. The total economic losses were equal to 1.5 years' net income per family. The value of labor, land, and draft animals declined at the same time that the price of grain increased rapidly, deeming the crisis an entitlement failure. People who managed to retain their food or credit took advantage of their poor neighbors by purchasing their old assets and then selling them back to the original owners at outrageous prices. The conflict between Kuomintang and the Communist Party made the subsistence crisis worse. It prevented relief agencies from distributing grain throughout the flood zone and prevented agricultural recovery. The food crisis within these zones of conflict became so bad that some people turned to cannibalism. 1,100,000 workers were employed to reconstruct almost 2,000 kilometers of dikes throughout the first half of 1932. Before the central government aided its people, local elites provided assistance to communities devastated by the flooding, with guilds, benevolent societies, and religious institutions feeding and sheltering refugees. In the wake of the disaster, the government set up organizations such as the Hui River Conservancy Commission to address flood problems, which only had the funding to construct small dams. Due to regular flooding, there were some mitigating devices in place. However, because of the higher than usual rainfall, these devices were overtaken, destroyed easily. Because of the disposition of the majority of the population being impoverished field workers, they were forced to vacate their homes and land, leaving behind their livelihood, becoming refugees, either barely surviving on handouts, or succumbing to disease or another form of death. 2 months after the flood, millions of Chinese refugees returned to their old homes, trying to dig them out, waiting for the government to help them rebuild their homes and their farms. Since 1949, the government has put about $27 billion into water control projects, including the construction of 120,000 miles of dikes. In terms of regular flooding, mitigation, and preparation, those who can afford it and are more well off have systems and bodies in place in case of aid, but those who are located in impoverished areas must fend for themselves.